We have two recent trials that have changed the treatment paradigm in the first-line setting, which is a big change for the field. Both of these studies have successfully challenged sunitinib as a standard of care in the treatment of metastatic kidney cancer, and sunitinib has been one of the gold standards over 10 years now since its original approval back in 2006. Now, we're going to be discussing both of these studies today. First, a TKI study, the CABOSUN trial, a randomized phase 2 study that tested a novel tyrosine kinase inhibitor, cabozantinib, in comparison to sunitinib, and then an immunotherapy TKI comparison, the phase 3 CheckMate-214 study that led to the approval of ipilimumab plus nivolumab in this disease. Cabozantinib, it's important to know, had previously been FDA approved in TKI pretreated patients, which predates the analysis of this study. This trial, the CABOSUN trial, is a smaller randomized phase 2 study that was conducted in the cooperative group. Mechanism was an alliance study that was published by Choweri et al. In the Journal of Clinical Oncology last year. And this study was a randomized phase 2 trial that enrolled about 150 patients and randomized them 1-to-1 to receive either sunitinib or cabozantinib for the treatment of metastatic disease. This trial limited enrollment to patients with IMDC intermediate or poor risk disease. That was unique in that way, and it pursued a primary endpoint of progression-free survival. This was a positive study that demonstrated superior PFS in patients treated with a novel tyrosine kinase inhibitor, cabozantinib, which is distinctly different from sunitinib in that it not only blocks VEGF receptor signaling, but also AXL and MET, both of which are thought to mediate angiogenesis alternative to VEGF mediated neovasculature. Both AXL and MET signaling have been shown to be upregulated in patient samples treated with sunitinib with acquired resistance to that drug. So in this trial, it was now shown that indeed cabozantinib was superior to sunitinib. The FDA approved the drug for the first-line indication regardless of IMDC risk status, although the trial, it's important to note, was conducted exclusively in patients with intermediate poor risk IMDC status. The second study we're going to be discussing is the CheckMate-214 study that led to the FDA approval of ipilimumab-nivolumab combination treatment in treatment-naive patients with intermediate poor risk disease. So this was a very large phase 3 global trial that randomized patients 1-to-1 to receive either standard sunitinib or the combination of ipilimumab plus nivolumab for the treatment of metastatic disease. This brought on about 1,100 patients, and patients were stratified by IMDC risk status and by geographic region. And this was an interesting trial in its statistical design. It had 3 co-primary endpoints, and it was powered to demonstrate a difference in all 3, the first being overall survival, the second objective response rate, and the third progression-free survival. And in order to accommodate all 3, the alpha was split between the 3. So there was a higher threshold, or rather a lower p-value necessary than what we are used to seeing in order to demonstrate significance for each of these 3. Patients were treated on a standard sunitinib schedule with 4-week, 2-week, 50 milligrams daily, and ipilimumab-nivolumab treatment schedule, it's important to note, was actually different from what is approved for melanoma, and that's based on the phase 1 work that had been done in kidney cancer specifically. This study was successful in demonstrating superiority in 2 of the 3 primary endpoints. So overall survival was superior for the immunotherapy combination with a hazard ratio of 0.63. And landmark analyses had also suggested that more patients were alive at 12 and 18 months in the immunotherapy arm than the TKI arm. There was also a superior objective responses for the immunotherapy combination. That importantly included a 9% complete remission rate in patients with intermediate poor risk disease. It's important to note that these primary analyses were conducted in the intermediate poor risk population only. So while the trial brought on patients with favorable, intermediate, and poor risk disease, the primary endpoint analyses were conceptualized so that they were limited to patients with intermediate and poor risk disease, and that was done based on a prior experience with a combination that suggested higher efficacy in this population. The third primary endpoint, progression-free survival, was numerically in favor of the immunotherapy combination, but did not meet the pre-specified threshold for significance.